Welcome to Out of the Past, brought to you by the Martin County Historical Society. My name is Lenny Tvedten. I'll be your host today. Today we're going to visit with Paul Gladfelter. He's a longtime resident of Fairmont, but he moved here about 50 years ago, and the reason he came was something to do with Wick homes. So first of all, Paul, what brought you to Fairmont?
Well, it was a story of being tired of being on the road for 15 years. I was a sales engineer for a company out of Portland, Oregon that sold capital goods equipment to the paper industry. I've been to every paper mill in the United States. We finally wound up in Appleton, Wisconsin, and at that particular time I was tired of being on the road, and so I decided that I was going to go into my own business. So my God-given talent was mechanical stuff. That's why I was sales engineer. And so I started building houses, got my realtor's license, and I was building a house one time, and in order to do it the way most people, contractors, do it, is to get a contract and then get the material that you were going to build sent to the job site.
Is that kind of like what a stick-built house is called?
That's called, right, Lenny, very good. That's called a stick-built house. And so if it was in the fall or it was in the spring and they delivered all this material, which you had to have in order to start building from the ground up.
So you were thinking maybe take a different approach than that.
Yeah, well, what happened one time, it was everything that I've done in my life has always been something that God has been intervening in. And I was building a house one time, and I had the deck all done, and there was a piece of plywood that was over the stairwell, if you will. That's where we would put the stairs down to the basement. And there was a piece of plywood over the deck, and for some unknown reason, one of the other men that was working on the site decided to take that piece of plywood off that hole, and I backed up and I went right through this hole, and I landed on my back, and my reaction was so quick. I landed on a pile of dirt. I jumped up and I started running around thinking, oh my God, I must have broken my spine or broken my back, and I didn't. And from that moment on, I started thinking a little bit different. Isn't there another and a better way of doing what I want to do as far as being a contractor and building?
So is that how you got to get introduced to Wick homes?
With Wick. And what happened, Lenny, was during that time right after that, just about a week after, I was on a site where I saw this huge truck come in, and it had material on the truck, and it was all covered up, and right after the truck came was this big crane, and I'm thinking, wow, what's going on here? So they took the canvas off of all this material that was on these trucks, and this crane got ready to lift these panels off of the truck. Now I'll tell you about the panels. Off the truck and start building this house. And I was so fascinated, I had to stay there for the whole day to find out what was going on. Here I was previously building houses. It was taking me 4, 5, 6 months out in the rain, walking in the mud, doing all that. And I thought, this has got to be a better way of doing it.
And this is in Wisconsin that you saw?
This was in Wisconsin, and the factory was in Mazomanie, Wisconsin. And so I thought, I'm going to that factory and find out what's going on with this.
So how did that get you to Fairmont?
Well, how it did was they hired me because of my background of traveling all over the country, being in sales. I mean, my forte is really selling, being able to talk to people and, show them what's good and what's bad. And so I went to the factory and I found out that everything that they do was done inside this huge factory. So all the material never got rained on, it never got wet.
So it was all environmentally
It
controlled.
it was very good, Lenny. That's exactly what it was, environmentally controlled. And so I went up and I said, "Are you guys looking? You have any openings in your corporation for anybody?" I mean, I was ready to move when I saw this. I thought,
And they hired you on the spot.
and they hired me on the spot. Well, because of my background
Sure.
in sales and going all over the country, you know, and not being afraid to do this and that. They hired me on the spot. And what they hired me for was interesting. They said, you know, we are thinking of building another plant, and we want to do it in the Midwest. Oh, you do? Yeah. John Wick. John Wick was the owner of this company. And incidentally, the company at that time was making double wide homes. They were making, we called them pole buildings, or they were in the agricultural business of building sheds and storage bins.
So more than just houses.
For the agriculture industry, and then the homes. So they said they want to build a plant in the Midwest. So we would like you to go out and look for a site and look for the possibility of getting dealers. So on a realm of whatever, you know, just putting my faith in God that this was going to work, Wick Homes hired the plant manager, the general manager, and me as sales manager to move to the Midwest. So the three of us with our families, I mean, we all had families, we were young. And at this time, I still had 3 boys that were in high school, and I had one that was in college in western Wisconsin. So we all, on good faith, moved to Fairmont, Minnesota.
Why was Fairmont picked?
Well, it was really interesting. We looked at 2 other towns that we thought might be a possibility of building a plant in.
Sure.
One of them was Le Sueur, and the other was St. Peter. And then the third one was Fairmont. And the reason Fairmont was so good was because we at that time had 2 men that were here in Fairmont that worked for Wick and sold their products, all 3 of them. They were able to sell the pole buildings, the homes.
What year was that?
That was 1971 that I was hired by Wick. And then we moved here. All 3 of us came to Fairmont, Minnesota. We built Wick Homes to live in. And I remember in October of 72 moving into my home down by the golf course, and it was snowing. There was about 2 feet of snow when I was unloading my furniture to go into my new home.
Well, what was it about Fairmont that impressed the company or you and the other 2 people to want to come?
Oh, it was wonderful. It was so wonderful. When I came to Fairmont and I saw what Fairmont had to offer us, I thought this has got to be the place that we have to build a plant. This main street here, the 4-block area, there wasn't a vacant place of business. People were walking up and down the streets. They were trying to find parking spots in order to be able, you know, to be part of this community, and to all these stores. I mean, it's amazing what was here. The other thing that was really important for us was the industrial base that Fairmont had. Fairmont had 4 or 5 big corporations. There was Armour's and Stokely's. There was 3M.
Railway Motors.
There was Railway Motors. There was Aerospace Systems, right. And that was one thing. The other thing was Fairmont at that time, which was not only the public school system, Lenny, that was very important because the public school system was very strong. Not only that, they had a Catholic school system and they had the Lutheran school system. So anybody coming into Fairmont had the choice of one of those 3 school systems in order in order to use with this. And the ratings on the educational system were very high at that time. One of the other things that we thought as a drawing point was we had an Olympic pool. Now that might sound like, oh, so what? What about Olympic pool? Well, people that wanted to swim with an Olympic pool that was indoors, we could use that pool for 12 months of the year. So all these little things just kind of worked together as to Fairmont has got to be the place where we're going to build this plant.
Okay, so what really happened with the plant? Was it built here?
Well, it was kind of a sad story. Now, remember, 3 of us in faith moved here, built houses with the idea that we were going to have a plant.
Sure.
Well, in 74, things started to go in the dumps as far as construction was concerned and timing. And Wick Homes was a very successful corporation. Mm-hmm. And, you have to make a profit in order to make something go. And John Wick, who was very, very smart, and the corporation was really high-rated corporation, just decided that, we got to wait a little bit to see if that comes out of that trough that the construction business went into. Well, the sad part of the whole thing, in about the end of 74, they decided not to build the plant here. Now, what we had when we first moved here, the 3 of us, the plant manager, the sales manager, me as sales manager, and the general manager, we came here in faith. And now what do? We're here, we're stuck. They're not going to build the plant. What are we going to have to do? Well, 2 of them, we all had the opportunity to move back to Mazomania, Wisconsin, where the main plant was. And 2 of them decided to move back with the understanding that when another opportunity came up, they would be able to go wherever that opportunity was.
But you decided to stay.
But I decided to stay here.
And then what did you do from there? Did you stay with Wick then?
Oh, yeah. Well, what happened was, since Cliff Ketchum and Ray Baxter, who were selling the 3 products of Wick Homes, we split that up. And they kept the pole buildings and they kept the double wide homes. And I took the dealership on as the sales for the homes business.
How long did you do that then?
I did that for about 10 years.
Okay.
And during that time, it was very successful. And I remember having so much fun working, because a model home on Highway 15 going south, and that's where my office was. I invested a lot of money with the understanding and hope that I would be able to sell enough homes that I could survive.
Okay, speaking of selling homes, are there many Wick homes in Fairmont?
There are a lot of Wick homes in Fairmont. I would say overall, there probably are maybe 75 Wick homes in Fairmont.
In Fairmont alone, okay.
But I had a territory. I sold from that model home that I had on Highway 15. I sold houses to people that were moving to Minneapolis, to Hayward and Iowa. I remember building 3 houses in Hayward, and Hayward is right on the South Dakota border. So during that period of time, Wick Homes was very, very successful in the Midwest with the 3 homes that we were building.
So you were in Fairmont, but you could sell homes throughout the region, throughout the Midwest area,
oh, yeah.
Not just Fairmont.
Yeah, I had a man that I built a home for him in Fairmont, and then the corporation decided to move him to Minneapolis, and he came up to me and he said, "Would you build me a home in Minneapolis?" I said, "I certainly would."
So did you have to work on your own then, or did you have a staff, secretaries and so on?
I had a staff of 1.
Was that Paul?
No. During that time, we had CBs, and I had a tower, and I had a CB phone, and I hired a girl. In fact, I remember her name, and she's still around in Fairmont. Her name was Judy Gunther, and she's from the Gunther family. Judy was my secretary, and I would get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I would start going out. One year, I built 26 houses. So you can imagine how many subcontractors I had going to build 26 houses. Because after the house was completely erected in one day, because when the houses would come, we would put it on the foundation that I had built, and by the time the day was finished, the house was completely up, enclosed, and ready to shingle. That was the only thing that wasn't done, but it was completely enclosed, out of the weather, and of course I loved it. And I remember working 18 hours a day because I loved doing what I was doing. And
was this when you say you worked for Wick Homes for 10 more years? Was that your last job then, or did you do something after that?
Then
was that when?
Then the building business went in the tank again. Okay. I mean, believe it or not. And there was another contractor here. He was my competitor, and I won't mention the names. But when that went in the tank the second time, in the building business just wasn't very good, and people weren't buying houses, and they weren't building. He moved out of town. I decided to stay. Mm-hmm. And then I built for another year. I built my last home I built was in 1983, which is the one I live in now. And then I just stayed here, and I got another job and did this and I did that and kind of worked until I retired. Homes part kind of fell apart in Fairmont after I gave up the dealership. Mm-hmm. There was a time when there was one other person that became a Wick dealer, and it only lasted a couple of years, and that was about the end. And Wick hasn't, as the home part, has not been active in this area since that time.
But in terms of the Midwest, it is still a going business.
Still in the Midwest, it's going strong.
Well, Paul, thank you very much for being with us today and telling us about Wick Homes and your experiences. It's been very interesting, and it sounds like you had a really good run with that. So appreciate it very much. Thank you for watching Out of the Past, brought to you by the Martin County Historical Society. I'm Lenny Tvedten, your host. We'll see you again next time or at the Pioneer Museum.